It's 7 a.m. Every atom in your body is screaming for just 5 more minutes of sleep. Your brain feels like it's been packed in cotton balls. You have a choice. Either crawl back under the covers and accept defeat, or you initiate the launch sequence. The launch sequence, of course, involves a sacred brown liquid, a magical bean juice that transforms you from a grumpy monosyllabic gremlin into a vaguely functional human being. It's our rocket fuel, our courage in a cup. The only thing standing between us and replying to that work email with, "I don't know, you figure it out." But this magical substance that runs the modern world is a shockingly recent invention. So what did humanity do before they could just mainline a triple-shot espresso? How did our ancestors face the crushing existential dread of a Tuesday morning without a single drop of coffee to their name? Well, it turns out the desperate quest for a morning pick-me-up is as old as civilization itself. They just had to get a lot more creative, and in some cases, a whole lot drunker. So, pour yourself a cup, and let's take a journey back to a time when the most common morning buzz came from a brewery. Our story begins nearly 10,000 years ago in the Fertile Crescent, with the invention of agriculture. And as soon as humans figured out how to grow grain, they immediately figured out the second most important thing you can do with it: make beer. Now, when you hear beer for breakfast, you're probably picturing a frat house at 11 a.m. But for the ancient world, beer wasn't a party starter. It was a survival tool. The water back then was a biological minefield, teeming with invisible things that wanted to turn your intestines inside out. But the process of fermenting grain into beer killed off most of those nasty microbes. So, drinking beer was literally safer than drinking water. And it wasn't the 9% ABV craft IPA you're thinking of. Ancient beer was thick, porridge-like, and probably only about as alcoholic as a modern kombucha. It was packed with B vitamins and calories. It was so essential that the Egyptians paid the workers who built the pyramids in it. It was liquid bread, because chewing solid food was apparently too much effort for our ancestors. It didn't make you any smarter, but it gave you the fuel to do dumb things with incredible energy. So for thousands of years, humanity's morning routine wasn't about getting caffeinated. It was about getting your carbs in liquid form, with just enough alcohol to take the edge off. It was the original breakfast of champions. Moving forward to the classical world of Greece and Rome, the beverage of choice got an upgrade. They traded in the soupy beer for a more refined, elegant, and frankly, much more alcoholic alternative: wine. Wine wasn't just a drink. It was the lubricant of Western civilization. In Greece, the smartest people in history, Plato, Socrates, Aristotle, would get together for drinking parties called symposiums. This is where they'd debate the very nature of reality, all while getting progressively more sloshed. It was like a TED Talk, but with a much higher chance of someone trying to wrestle the keynote speaker. The Romans took it even further. They drank wine all day long. But, to be fair, they almost always watered it down. Drinking wine straight was considered barbaric, a real party foul in ancient Rome. Their goal wasn't necessarily to get hammered. It was a constant, low-level buzz to get them through the day. They'd hang out at Peppina's, the Roman equivalent of a coffee shop, sipping on their watered-down vino and complaining about chariot traffic. So, for the Romans, the daily pick-me-up wasn't a stimulant. It was a mild depressant. It didn't sharpen your focus. It just made the crushing weight of running a massive, dysfunctional empire a little more bearable. It was less get up and go, and more lie down and hope Gaul doesn't invade again. Meanwhile, on the other side of the world, a completely different kind of revolution was brewing. Literally. In China, according to legend, around 2737 BC, an emperor and mythical wellness guru named Shennong was chilling in his garden. Now, Shennong was a bit of a biohacker. He was obsessed with figuring out the properties of different plants, usually by eating them himself, which is a terrible scientific method that I cannot recommend. Anyway, the story goes he was boiling some water when a leaf from a nearby wild tea plant, a plant with a future, a destiny, drifted down and fell into his pot. He took a sip and found the resulting brew to be refreshing, stimulating, and delicious. He had just discovered tea, and with it, humanity's first mainstream non-alcoholic stimulant. This was a game changer. For the first time, you could drink something that made you feel more awake and focused, and didn't result in questionable life choices at 2 a.m. Buddhist monks, in particular, loved the stuff because it helped them stay awake during their long marathon prayer sessions. It was the original energy drink, divinely approved to help you power through those meditation sessions without face-planting into the Zen garden. It eventually evolved into a complex social ritual with elaborate tea ceremonies. So while the West was marinating in alcohol, the East had found a different path. It was a calm, focused energy. It was a sharpen-your-mind buzz, not a wrestle-a-philosopher buzz. A completely different approach to the age-old problem of just trying to get through the day. But let's not forget the Americas, where another powerful stimulant was fueling empires. We're talking about cacao, the raw ingredient for chocolate. But before you get too excited, I need you to forget everything you know about a sweet, creamy Hershey bar. This was not that. For the Maya and the Aztecs, cacao was sacred. It was the food of the gods. It was also a bitter, gritty, and often spicy energy drink. They would grind the roasted cacao beans into a paste, mix it with water, chili peppers, and cornmeal, and then froth it up. The result was a thick, powerful beverage. This wasn't a comforting cup of hot cocoa. This was warrior fuel. This was pre-battle hype juice. It was packed with theobromine, a cousin of caffeine, that provided a long-lasting, intense energy boost. It was so valuable that the Aztecs used cacao beans as currency. Imagine that. Your morning pick-me-up was also your rent money. Sorry, can't afford a large today. I've got to pay my taxes. So, in Mesoamerica, your morning cup of joe was a spicy, bitter sludge that also happened to be your life savings. It was an intense, sacred experience, a world away from the social sipping of wine or tea. So we have beer, wine, tea, and chili chocolate. The world had options. But the story of our favorite bean begins, so the legend goes, in the 9th century, on the high plateaus of Ethiopia, with a bored goat herd named Kaldi. One day, Kaldi noticed his goats were acting weird. Weirder than usual, anyway. They were dancing, bleating, and full of a strange, manic energy, refusing to sleep at night. Like they'd just discovered heavy metal. Being a man of science, or at least curiosity, Kaldi investigated. He found his goats were enthusiastically munching on the bright red berries of a strange plant. Putting two and two together, Kaldi tried the berries himself. He felt a rush of energy. He had discovered coffee. Excited, he ran to a nearby monastery. The head monk, who was clearly not a morning person, declared the berries the devil's work, and, in a fit of pious rage, threw them into a fire. But then, a miracle. As the beans inside the berries began to roast, they released that incredible, unmistakable aroma of coffee. The monks, suddenly very interested, pulled the roasted beans from the fire, ground them up, and dissolved them in hot water, creating the world's first cup of brewed coffee. They found it allowed them to stay awake for their long nights of prayer. The devil's work had suddenly become a divine productivity hack. From that legendary monastery, coffee spread across the Arab world, into Turkey, and eventually into Europe, where it would kickstart an age of reason and revolution, and give humanity the ultimate weapon in its eternal war against the morning. From soupy beer and watered-down wine to zen-inducing tea and warrior fuel chocolate, Humanity tried everything to get a little boost. Every culture found its own solution to the problem of just getting started. It was a global quest for a better buzz. Every one of those drinks was a stepping stone in our long, complicated relationship with staying awake. They were all just different answers to the same fundamental question that echoes through the ages. How am I possibly going to get through this day? So the next time you hold that warm mug in your hands and breathe in that glorious aroma, take a second. That cup of coffee isn't just a drink. It's the end of a 10,000-year-long search. It's the legacy of dancing goats, meditating monks, and every single person in history who just really didn't want to get out of bed. Be grateful that your morning ritual is a simple pleasure and not a thick, porridge-like beer.